Ebola virus has been in Nigeria for about 4 weeks, and the federal government and health officials have been working hard to ensure it does not become an epidemic. All these happening alongside a lingering strike action by the Nigerian Medical Association. You are welcome to the Gavel. I am Omelogo Nadi. On Friday, the 22nd of August, the Minister of Health announced 2 fresh cases of the Ebola virus, bringing the known cases up to 14, with 5 deaths, 5 in recovery, 4 in isolation, and over 200 under surveillance. Last week, a woman under surveillance traveled to the eastern part of Nigeria, causing panic on a possible interstate spread and also bringing to question the efforts of government to efficiently manage the surveillance cases and contain the spread of the disease in Nigeria. We had a chat with a lawmaker on the constitutional implications of these restrictions on health grounds and the issues surrounding Ebola and health in Nigeria.
First of all, if you look at our constitution, the constitution, gives room for people to have free movement. So if you have to put any legislation in place, you have to repeal, go back for constitutional amendment to alter that provision, which will now, of course, in effect say, in national disaster like this, you can now invoke that provision, which now inhibits or makes people not to move freely, especially when you are perceived to be a carrier. But in this case, you can't. It's the constitutional provision. You can't even discriminate. It's just like in issue of HIV, stigmatization. People have come with all manners of bills to say that people should stop this idea of trying to isolate those who are living with HIV. And the same thing also on this issue of Ebola. I think the best thing that Nigerians can do for themselves is to be cautious. People are talking about incubation of 21 days. Just to be magnanimous, but the truth of the matter is that 2 days, the person is gone. So except people begin to see that as something that is very serious. Even till today, even yesterday, I could remember I went for a book launch for Professor W.H.O. And when I got there, people tried to shake me and I tried to avoid it. And, they were like, hey, why are you, you can see the bitterness in them. But for me, I didn't really give a hoot because it's about my health and the health of my family. If it affects me, automatically it passes on to my family. And so for me, what should happen is for government to create an awareness and begin to see it just like the way they used to see the Osus as taboo. Begin to see this as a taboo, where people should be so educated that if you notice that somebody is even sneezing, even having on kind of cold that leads to fluids coming out from the person's body, you should be careful.
Now, during this short span, say 3 weeks or thereabouts, since Ebola was brought into Nigeria, we understand that the president has put down 1.9 billion naira as a fund to check this scourge. Now, can you give us an insight into the expenditure, how this fund will be expended?
We had interactive section with the people from the health and associated health institutions, and I think it was a fallout of that interactive section, because if you remember, the port health services brought up an idea that they needed to recruit more, about 660, and as at that time they were looking at the staff strength to be about in the neighborhood about 850 or thereabouts, and they needed additional 660, and also Ministry of Health also said that they needed more personnel to also engage not only in administering what you can similarly call drugs, if there is any, or even to also get involved in caring for those that are already being quarantined, or to also get involved in educating the masses. In doing that, it's not going to be free of charge. You're talking about, remember the minister was talking about doing life policy for those medical officers that will be out there exposed. What happens to them as individuals? If anything happens, when it calls and it is happening, how do they get to be indemnified? So part of this fund that have been so released is meant to tackle those associated costs.
We understand that a lot of the entry points that have been under consideration have been airports and seaports and a few legal and known land borders. But we know that there are so many illegal entry points into Nigeria by virtue of the few African countries that share borders with Nigeria, Guinea to included. Now, what is being done to look into all these several other illegal entry points? Can the Port Health Services handle that, or who should be in charge?
I think that's a good question. First of all, if you recall at that interactive session, I was actually not really satisfied. Not satisfied because I put a question before the Port Health Director, and which bordered on, I asked, how many seaports do we have? How many airports, international airports do we have? And how many borders do we have? If you need to control the inflow and outflow of people, you must have this thing handy. And you cannot be in charge of port health and you will not be able to, just at the beck and call, know the number of seaports, the number of airports, the number of borders that are very prone to any form of insurgence. Those were questions that they could not give to the House. And of course, they promised that they were going to send it by email, and we had to give them our email, but up to now, we've not received that. Now, taking a coup from that, if you really need to curb inflow, which in effect will also, to a greater extent, assist in curbing the spread, bearing in mind that you are able to know the number of borders and seaports and airports that you have, where people move in and out. If you're able to know that, that will assist. But if you don't know, it now becomes even difficult. And in even submitting that they are in need of 660, if you don't know the number of seaports, you don't know the number of international airports, how do you now allocate that 660? Is it that it's under anticipated or over bloated in terms of the number of personnel that they will want to recruit? These are issues that, for me, is looking for an answer. And there's no way you can also talk of controlling the borders without